Hi students. Today Miss B is trying out a new system called Loom where she can video record herself and her lesson using her computer. So this is something new Miss B is learning. Please show her some grace if there are mistakes, and if you have any feedback for Miss B, things she could do better, things you wish she was doing, or things she did well, please don't hesitate to reach out with your parents via email or cell phone to let me know how I can best support you from home. So today's skill we're going to be working on is determining the main idea of a text. One thing we know about the main idea is that the main idea is what the text is mostly about. You all know that for the many times we reviewed what a main idea is in class. One thing that's important to know about the main idea is that the main idea is different from a topic. So a topic is the subject of a text, and the main idea is a little more specific, and it is what the text is mostly about. Usually, I can easily determine a topic and maybe some of the main idea by reading the title of our text. So I know this text, based on the title, is going to be about someone called Joe DiMaggio. So let's go ahead and add what our topic of the text is based on what we know from our title, and maybe we will find out a little more about the topic and main idea as we read. I'm going to read the text a first time, and then as we read, we are going to be thinking about key details in our text that support the main idea. We remember key details are important words and phrases that can be found in the text. So, follow along and track with me. If anyone could compete with Lou Gehrig for having a great reputation and the lifelong love of the fans, it was Joe DiMaggio. He was known as Joltin' Joe, Joe D, and the Yankee Clipper, after the smooth sailing of old-time ships. DiMaggio played for the Yankees from 1936 to 1951, though he missed the 1943-1945 seasons while serving in the Army during World War II. During DiMaggio's time with the Yankees, the club won 10 pennants and 9 World Series. I'm guessing that word pennants is something like a medal or a trophy. DiMaggio was a 3-time MVP, Most Valuable Player. The biggest highlight of his career came in 1941 when he hit 56 straight major league games. The streak is one of the baseball's longest standing records. No one has come closer than 44 hits in consecutive games since. Following his retirement, DiMaggio was a commercial spokesperson, was married briefly to actress Marilyn Monroe, and was a fixture at Yankee celebrations. He was introduced for most of his last 2 decades as the greatest living ball player. Though some might say Willie Mays and others had a better claim to that title. DiMaggio was named to the Hall of Fame in 1955 and passed away at the age of 84 in 1999. So we just got done reading our text for a first time. We remember close readers read text multiple times to gain understanding, and oftentimes we go back to the text to look for details that support our answer. But before we get started doing that, I want you to try to recount or tell again what you learned from these passages in just a few words. So if I was going to ask you the topic of this text or the subject of this text, what would you say it was about in 2 to 3 or 4 words? Go ahead and write those down in this topic box. Feel free to share with a parent if they're sitting there with you and see if you agree. If I were to define the topic of this text, I would say it is about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career. Now, when we think about the main idea of the text, we want to think about what the text is mostly about. So I'm going to think more in depth and specifically about this topic. What does this text tell me about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career? Let's go back and look at this first paragraph. It says, if anyone could compete with Lou Gehrig for having a great reputation and the lifelong love of fans, it was Joe DiMaggio. He was known as Joltin' Joe, Joe D, and the Yankee Clipper, after the smooth sailing of old-time ships. DiMaggio played for the Yankees from 1936 to 1951, though he missed the 1943 seasons to 1945 seasons while serving in the Army during World War II. What does this text tell me about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career? What do you think is one of the most important details about Joe DiMaggio and his baseball career in these texts? I want you to highlight that sentence in your text. Take a couple minutes of thinking time. What is the most important detail? So Ms. B knows, and some of you might know, oftentimes, but not always, the main idea of a paragraph or the most important detail of a text is sometimes included in the first sentence. So let's take a look back at our first sentence, because this is the detail Miss B chose. It says, if anyone could compete with Lou Gehrig for having a great reputation and the lifelong love of fans, it was Joe DiMaggio. So I think that is the most important detail of this paragraph, that Joe DiMaggio had a great reputation and lifelong love of fans. That is the most important thing I want you to take away from this text. So I'm going to highlight it here. Oops. I'm not sure why I can't find the highlight button, so I'm just going to underline it. And I'm going to add it to the first key detail box. Joe DiMaggio had a great reputation and the lifelong love of the fans. Let's keep reading the second paragraph, and as we read, I want you to highlight the detail in this second paragraph that you think is most important about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career. Remember, we are collecting key details to try to determine what we think this passage is mostly about, or the main idea. During DiMaggio's time with the Yankees, the club won 10 pennants and 9 World Series. DiMaggio was a 3-time MVP. The biggest highlight of his career came in 1941 when he hit in 56 straight Major League games. The streak is one of the baseball's longest-standing records. No one has come closer than 44 hits in consecutive games since. Go ahead and highlight a key detail you think tells us something important about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career. And begin to write it in your second key detail box for me. So I would imagine a couple of you chose different details here. You might have chose that the club won 10 pennants and 9 World Series during his time with the Yankees. You might have chosen that he holds one of baseball's longest standing records, or that he was a 3-time most valuable player. All of those give us important details about the topic of our text, Joe DiMaggio's baseball career. So whichever one of those details you chose that tells us something important or a key detail about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career, go ahead and highlight it or underline and fill it in your second key detail box. Lastly, we will look for a key detail in our final paragraph. Remember, we are thinking about key details that support what the text is mostly about, so you may already have an idea about what this text is mostly about, something a little more specific than Joe DiMaggio's baseball career. What is the text telling us about his baseball career? Look for a key detail that supports that main idea. Highlight it as we read if you think you find a key detail. Following his retirement, DiMaggio was a commercial spokesperson, was married briefly to actress Marilyn Monroe, and was a fixture at Yankee celebrations. He was introduced for most of his last 2 decades as the greatest living ball player, though some might say Willie Mays and others had a better claim to that title. DiMaggio was named to the Hall of Fame in 1955 and passed away at age 84 in 1999. Take a couple minutes and search for what you believe is a key detail about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career. Highlight it and begin writing it in your key detail box. If you have a piece of paper and you did not have a chance to print this graphic organizer out, you may create a graphic organizer on your own. In a blank sheet of paper, you would just draw boxes just like this. We know these 3 boxes are key details that support our main idea and topic. Okay, you should have your last key detail picked out. Now let me tell you a key detail, one of our students might have picked. I think there is a chance that someone read this passage and picked Joe DiMaggio was briefly married to actress Marilyn Monroe. I'm thinking if we were sitting in class, you guys would have gone, ew, and highlighted that text because it told you something you had not learned about Joe DiMaggio, that he was married. Think for a moment about why that is not a key detail. How does the fact that he was married briefly to the actress Marilyn Monroe not tell us anything about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career? It also does not support what the text is mostly about. Does any other part of the text talk about his marriage or his relationship with family? No, so we are not going to choose that as a key detail, although it did tell us something new about Joe DiMaggio. Look at our key details we have here. Joe DiMaggio had a great reputation and the lifelong love of fans. Joe DiMaggio holds one of baseball's longest standing records. Both those key details tell us about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career, and they will also support the main idea, what we believe the text is mostly about. So I'm looking for a key detail, and you already looked for a key detail that supported something that tells us about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career. I'm going to choose the sentence, he was introduced for most of his last 2 decades as the greatest living baseball player. And fill in my last box. Joe DiMaggio was known as the greatest living baseball player. Now, we have found our key details in our text, and now we will think more specifically about the main idea. We decided our topic or subject of the text was about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career. Now I want to see if our key details tell us a little more about what the text is mostly about. What do I know about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career? From these key details, let's read them again. Joe DiMaggio had a great reputation and the lifelong love of fans. Joe DiMaggio holds one of baseball's longest standing records. And Joe DiMaggio was known as the greatest living baseball player. In a couple sentences, I want you to use these key details to think about what the text is mostly about. It needs to be something more specific than Joe DiMaggio's baseball career. What do you know about his baseball career based on these 3 key details? Take a minute to write in your main idea box right here. I want you to start your sentence with, this text is mostly about awesome. So if you are thinking along the right track, you might have written something like, This text is mostly about how Joe DiMaggio was one of the world's best baseball players. Notice how the main idea tells us more than the topic. I know the topic of this text is about Joe DiMaggio's baseball career, but what the text is mostly about is how Joe DiMaggio was one of the world's best baseball players. Let's see if our key details match that main idea. First, Joe DiMaggio had a great reputation in the lifelong love of the fans. Does that tell us how Joe DiMaggio was one of the world's best baseball players? Yes. How so? Because he had a great reputation among fans and the fans loved him. That means he was probably one of the world's best or really good at what he did. Second key detail. Joe DiMaggio holds one of baseball's longest standing records. Does that tell us how he was one of the world's best baseball players? If you say yes, think about how so. And lastly, Joe DiMaggio was known as the greatest living baseball player. Does that tell us how he was one of the world's best baseball players? Yes. So this is how I would check my thinking when I'm choosing the main idea of a passage. All of these key details in the text support this main idea, which is more specific than the topic. Now, I want you to take a couple minutes to explain how key details support the main idea. So, for example, Joe DiMaggio had a great reputation in the lifelong love of fans. How does that tell us that he was one of the world's best baseball players? I might write something like, Joe DiMaggio was loved and had a great reputation among fans. He would not be loved and have a great reputation if he was not a good baseball player. This shows that Joe DiMaggio was an incredible baseball player. Next, I want you to use our second key detail to explain how Joe DiMaggio was one of the world's best baseball players, how that key detail supports our main idea. So you might start your sentence with something like, Joe DiMaggio holds one of baseball's longest standing records. This shows what about our main idea? Tell your parent or your guardian or another person sitting there with you, or write the sentence to yourself. This shows what? How does it support the idea that he was one of the world's best baseball players? You might have written something like, this shows his record is better than all other baseball players in the world. His nickname, our last key detail, was the greatest living baseball player, confirming he is one of the best in the world. This is how we would explain how our key details support the main idea. We are going to continue practicing this the rest of this week with new text. For example, the text we will use tomorrow is called the Tour de France. So be thinking about key details and main idea as you practice reading at home this week. What are the key details that tell you what the topic of our text is and what our text is mostly about? You also have some iReady practice scheduled and assigned at home, so make sure you are using that to support your thinking and practice this skill as well. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, if you guys have any feedback for Miss B, if you'd like her to know anything about her lesson, what she could do better, what she could do well, please have your guardian email me, text me, call me, whatever. I miss you guys and I'm thinking about you all the time. Bye.